Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to find out they weren't who you thought they were? Imagine walking up to a room, excited to see your closest friends, but right before you open the door, you hear them talking about you. And they aren't saying anything nice. They are laughing at your biggest, deepest insecurity. What do you do? Do you walk in and confront them? Or do you walk away and question everything? In today's story, The Overheard Insult, we follow Ethan as he faces this exact betrayal from his best friends, Caleb and Chloe. Listen closely to how he navigates the pain, deals with the confrontation, and finds his own strength. Pay attention to the expressions and vocabulary we use to describe relationships, trust, and conflict. Let's begin. The neon sign of the corner diner buzzed softly, casting a warm glow over the booth where Ethan, Caleb, and Chloe sat. This was their spot. For 3 years, they had spent almost every Friday night here, sharing fries, complaining about work, and celebrating each other's victories. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Caleb had just landed a major promotion, and Chloe had finally sold her first digital artwork. The energy at the table was high, filled with loud laughter and the comfortable overlap of voices that only exists among best friends. To anyone watching, Ethan was the life of the party. He raised his glass, cracked jokes, and cheered the loudest for his friends. But beneath his bright smile, a familiar weight pressed heavily against his chest. For months, Ethan had been secretly drowning in financial stress, struggling to pay his rent after unexpected medical bills. It was his deepest vulnerability, an insecurity that made him feel like an absolute failure compared to his thriving peers. He went to great lengths to hide it, ordering the cheapest items on the menu and making casual excuses about saving up for a trip. Chloe leaned back, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you guys," she said softly, looking at Caleb and Ethan. Caleb nodded in agreement, throwing an arm around Ethan's shoulder. "We're a team, always have been." Ethan smiled, feeling a sudden wave of relief. Looking at his 2 closest confidants, he felt safe. He believed that no matter how unstable his life became, this bond was unbreakable. The following Tuesday, the rainy weather matched the heavy gray clouds blanketing the city. Ethan hurried up the carpeted stairs of Caleb's apartment building, carrying a bag of takeout containers. They had planned a casual movie night to unwind after a long, exhausting broadcast at work. Because he had caught an early bus, Ethan arrived 15 minutes ahead of schedule. He reached the 3rd floor, his sneakers squeaking softly against the linoleum floor. As he approached apartment 3B, he noticed the heavy wooden door was not fully latched, leaving a narrow crack. He raised his hand to knock, but paused when he heard his name spoken from inside. It was Chloe's voice, but the usual warmth in her tone was entirely missing. "I love Ethan, but it's getting really hard to ignore how cheap he's being lately," she said with a heavy sigh. Ethan froze, his hand hovering inches from the wooden doorframe as his heart skipped a beat. "I know exactly what you mean," Caleb replied, his voice echoing clearly through the small opening. "He ordered a side salad on Friday and claimed he wasn't hungry, but then he ate half our fries." Chloe let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut straight through Ethan's chest. "It's honestly pathetic how he pretends he's doing fine when he clearly can't even handle his basic finances. If you're failing that badly at 30, you need to change your lifestyle, not hide behind excuses." Caleb groaned in agreement, adding, "It's embarrassing to take him out around our professional colleagues anymore."
The plastic takeout bag slipped slightly in Ethan's grip, the crinkling sound amplified by the sudden silence in Ethan's mind. The air left his lungs as he stood paralyzed in the dimly lit hallway, the harsh words looping on a cruel rewrite in his head. His hands began to shake violently as the absolute certainty of his friendship shattered into pieces.
Ethan stood frozen for 5 long seconds, forcing the cold, heavy air back into his lungs. He desperately wanted to turn around and run down the stairs, but his legs refused to move. Instead, a strange, numb survival instinct took over his body. He deliberately cleared his throat loudly, stepped forward, and pushed the cracked door open. The sudden sound made Caleb and Chloe instantly snap their heads toward the entryway. The casual, judgmental expressions on their faces vanished, replaced by a flash of absolute panic. Chloe choked on her drink, coughing quickly as she set her glass down on the coffee table. Caleb jumped up from the sofa, his face turning a deep, guilty shade of red. "Hey man, you're early," Caleb said, his voice entirely too loud and strained. "Yeah, caught an early bus," Ethan replied, forcing his lips to form a perfectly empty, robotic smile. He walked into the living room and placed the warm takeout bag gently on the kitchen counter. Chloe scrambled to find her words, her eyes darting nervously between Caleb and Ethan's face. We were just talking about how much we love that diner from Friday," she lied smoothly. Ethan looked directly into her eyes, watching her squirm, but he kept his expression completely blank. "Right, great place," Ethan said softly, his chest burning with the intense pain of her deception. He sat down on the armchair opposite the couch, intentionally keeping a physical distance between them. The comfortable, easy silence they used to share was replaced by an agonizing, suffocating tension. Caleb opened the food containers, laughing nervously at jokes that weren't funny, trying to bury the guilt. Ethan nodded and smiled at all the right moments, pretending to watch the movie playing on the television screen, but he didn't hear a single word of the audio. He sat there like a ghost, trapped in a room with the people he trusted most, plotting his immediate escape. The next morning, Ethan woke up to a screen flashing with notifications. Caleb had sent 3 text messages, and Chloe had left a casual comment on his latest social media post. Normally, Ethan would reply within minutes, but today his phone felt like a block of ice in his hand. He flipped the device face down on his mattress and walked away, choosing absolute silence. For the next 4 days, Ethan completely disappeared from their shared digital world. He skipped their usual Wednesday evening group chat and declined an invitation to grab coffee on Friday morning. When Chloe called him directly on Saturday afternoon, he watched the phone ring until the screen went black. Inside his quiet apartment, Ethan's mind was a chaotic storm of painful memories and dark self-doubt. He spent hours pacing the floor, replaying every conversation they had ever shared over the past 3 years. When Caleb had helped him move apartments last year, was he secretly judging his cheap furniture? When Chloe smiled at his jokes, was she actually pitying his financial struggles behind his back? The harsh words from the hallway echoed constantly in his mind, changing how he viewed his entire history. He felt an overwhelming sense of shame, internalizing their cruel criticisms until he began to believe them. Maybe he really was a pathetic failure who couldn't handle the basic responsibilities of adulthood.
The safe space he had built with his best friends had turned into a toxic funhouse mirror, distorting his self-worth. By Sunday night, the initial shock of the betrayal had hardened into a cold, protective layer of anger. He wasn't ready to face them, and he wasn't sure if he ever wanted to hear their voices again. He realized he needed to fix his life, but he knew he had to do it completely on his own.
To escape the suffocating weight of his thoughts, Ethan decided to change his daily environment completely. He began spending his free evenings at a small, quiet community workshop on the other side of town. He had signed up for a basic woodworking class, a practical skill he had always wanted to learn but never had the time for. The smell of fresh sawdust and the rhythmic sound of sanding provided a welcome relief for his exhausted mind. Here, nobody knew his name, his past mistakes, or the humiliating secrets of his financial struggles. For the first few days, he kept his head down, focusing entirely on measuring lines and cutting smooth wooden boards. The instructor was an older, soft-spoken craftsman named David, who moved around the room with quiet confidence. "You're pressing too hard on the wood, Ethan," David said gently, placing a hand on the tool. "If you force it because you're angry, the grain will split and ruin the piece." Ethan stopped, wiping the sweat from his forehead as he realized how much aggression he was channeling into the project. "Sorry," Ethan muttered, looking down. "I guess I'm just trying to fix a lot of mistakes right now." David smiled kindly, looking at the rough block of oak sitting on the workbench. "Wood doesn't care about your mistakes, and it doesn't judge where you started. It only cares about the patience and respect you give it right now in this moment." Those simple words hit Ethan with unexpected force, cutting through the thick layer of shame he had been carrying. He realized he had been letting Caleb and Chloe's arrogant judgments define his entire value as a human being. Over the next 2 weeks, as the rough wood transformed into a beautiful, sturdy shelf, Ethan's confidence began to rebuild. He wasn't a failure, he was just a person navigating a difficult season of life, and that was perfectly okay. He finally felt a sense of grounding, realizing he was ready to face the storm waiting for him back home. Two weeks of absolute silence came to an abrupt end on a rainy Tuesday evening. Ethan was walking back from the community workshop, his hands tucked deep into his jacket pockets. As he rounded the corner toward his apartment building, two familiar figures stepped out from under the awning. It was Caleb and Chloe, both damp from the mist and looking incredibly anxious. "Ethan, finally!" Chloe cried out, taking a fast step forward with her arms slightly open. Ethan stopped dead in his tracks, his body instantly tensing as the old anxiety rushed back. "We've been calling you for days, man," Caleb said, his voice a mix of deep worry and frustration. "You completely ghosted us. We even called your office to make sure you were still alive." "I'm fine," Ethan said, his voice flat and completely devoid of the usual warmth they expected. "No way, Ethan. You don't just cut off your best friends for 2 weeks without a single explanation," Caleb demanded. "If you're mad about something, you need to tell us right now instead of acting like a child." The word child snapped something loose inside Ethan's chest, melting the cold guard he had built up. He looked directly at Caleb, then turned his sharp gaze at Chloe, who shrank back slightly under his stare. "You want to know why I disappeared?" Ethan asked, his voice deadly quiet but vibrating with intense emotion. 2 weeks ago, I arrived 15 minutes early for our movie night at your apartment, Caleb. The door wasn't fully closed." Chloe's face instantly lost all of its color, her mouth dropping open in sudden, horrified realization. "I stood in that hallway,
Ethan continued, stepping closer to them, "and I heard every single word you both said about me. I heard how pathetic I am. I heard how embarrassing it is to take me out around your professional friends. And I heard how much you love to laugh at my financial struggles behind my back." The busy city street around them seemed to fall completely silent as Caleb and Chloe froze, trapped by the weight of their own ugly words.
The heavy silence hung in the damp air between them, thick and suffocating. Chloe covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with absolute horror. Caleb swallowed hard, his jaw dropping slightly as he searched desperately for something to say. "Ethan! Oh my God, Ethan, no!" Chloe stammered, her voice trembling violently as a tear ran down her cheek. We didn't mean it like that, I swear to you." "Then how did you mean it, Chloe?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but cutting like a knife. Caleb stepped forward, his hands raised in a defensive gesture, his face flushed with deep embarrassment. "Look, man, we were just venting," Caleb said quickly, his voice tight with anxiety. "It was completely taken out of context. We were just stressed about work, and we were actually worried about you." Ethan let out a short, bitter laugh that lacked any real humor. "Worried about me? You called me pathetic, Caleb. You said I was an embarrassment to be around. You weren't worried about my life. You were just mocking my struggles to make yourselves feel superior." Chloe reached out to touch Ethan's arm, but he took a deliberate step backward, avoiding her hand completely. "Please, Ethan, it was a stupid, careless conversation," she begged, her voice breaking. "We value your friendship so much. We were just being idiots. Can we please go inside and talk about this?" Ethan looked at his two closest friends, seeing the genuine panic and regret written all over their faces. But the deep wound in his chest was still far too raw, and their flimsy excuses only made the pain worse. "No, we can't," Ethan said softly, shaking his head as a cold finality settled over him. "Hearing you say those things was bad enough, but watching you try to minimize it right now hurts even more. I need you both to leave." Without waiting for a reply, Ethan brushed past Caleb, unlocked the heavy glass door of his building, and stepped inside. He didn't look back as the door clicked shut behind him, leaving Caleb and Chloe standing alone in the dark, rainy street.
Inside his apartment, Ethan leaned his back against the closed front door, listening to the quiet room. For the first time in weeks, the heavy burden of shame didn't feel quite so crushing. By speaking the truth out loud, he had transferred the weight of that awful evening back to the people who caused it. Meanwhile, down on the rain-slicked street, Caleb and Chloe stood under the street lamp in stunned silence. The reality of what they had done crawled over them like a cold wave as they walked slowly back to Caleb's apartment. Sitting in the same living room where the insult had occurred, the space felt completely empty without Ethan's presence. "How could we say those things, Caleb?" Chloe whispered, staring at her hands as tears blurred her vision. "He was drowning financially, and instead of throwing him a rope, we stood here and laughed at him." Caleb rubbed his face with his hands, feeling a deep, sickening sense of regret settle into his stomach. "I was trying to sound successful and elite," Caleb admitted, his voice hollow and full of self-loathing. "I let my own professional arrogance turn me into a monster to the guy who has always had my back." Over the next week, the dynamic between the two remaining friends changed dramatically. They couldn't hang out without speaking about Ethan, and the guilt made it impossible to enjoy their own successes. They realized that Ethan's warmth and loyalty had been the actual glue holding their entire social circle together. Across town, Ethan was using his newfound clarity to quietly rebuild his life from the ground up.
He visited a financial advisor at a local nonprofit center, creating a strict, realistic plan to manage his medical debt. He continued going to the woodworking shop, finding immense satisfaction in creating beautiful things with his own hands. He missed Caleb and Chloe terribly, but he refused to compromise his dignity just to avoid being lonely. He was proving to himself that his value wasn't determined by his bank account, nor was it defined by the opinions of others. He was growing stronger on his own, unaware that his old friends were about to make a monumental choice. "3 weeks after the confrontation, Ethan received a notification that wasn't a text message or a phone call. It was an email from Caleb with Chloe copied on the message, titled simply, "An Apology." Ethan hesitated for a long moment before clicking the link, his heart thumping against his ribs. There were no defensive excuses in the text, no claims of things being taken out of context, and no demands for his time. Instead, it was a raw, honest acknowledgement of their arrogance, their cruelty, and the deep pain they had caused him. At the very end, Caleb wrote, "We don't expect you to forgive us, Ethan, but we want to show you that we are truly sorry. We'll be at the Community Park Pavilion this Saturday at noon. If you don't show up, we understand, and we won't bother you again." Saturday arrived, bringing with it a bright, clear afternoon that chased away the lingering gray dampness of the past weeks. Ethan spent the morning pacing his apartment, weighing his peace of mind against the history of a 3-year friendship. Ultimately, he realized that carrying the anger around was starting to feel just as heavy as carrying the original hurt. At precisely 12 o'clock, Ethan walked up the grassy hill toward the open-air wooden pavilion. Caleb and Chloe were already there, sitting quietly on a picnic bench, looking incredibly nervous. When they saw Ethan approaching, they both stood up immediately, but they didn't rush toward him this time. "Thank you for coming, Ethan," Chloe said softly, her eyes red and sincere as she offered a small, hesitant smile. Caleb nodded, stepping forward and looking Ethan directly in the eyes with absolute humility. "We wanted to give you something, Ethan," Caleb said, placing a heavy, neatly wrapped cardboard box on the table. Ethan carefully pulled the ribbon away and opened the box, revealing a premium set of professional woodworking chisels. Tucked beside the tools was a receipt showing a significant donation made in Ethan's name to the local medical debt relief fund. "We know money and gifts can't fix the trust we broke," Caleb said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "But we wanted to support the things that actually matter to you right now instead of judging them." Choli wiped a stray tear from her cheek. "We miss our friend Ethan, the real you, and we are so incredibly sorry." Looking at the tools and the donation receipt, Ethan felt the last icy remnants of his bitter anger finally begin to melt away. Ethan looked down at the woodworking tools, feeling the quiet weight of the moment settle over the pavilion. He took a deep breath, looking up to face Caleb and Chloe, who were waiting silently for his response. "Thank you," Ethan said softly, his voice sincere as he touched the smooth handles of the new chisels. "The donation to the medical fund, that means more to me than you can possibly know." Chloe let out a shaky breath of relief, while Caleb offered a small, grateful nod. "I accept your apology," Ethan continued, keeping his tone calm, steady, and grounded. "But things cannot just go right back to exactly how they were before all of this happened. I need you to understand that trust takes a very long time to rebuild once it has been broken." Caleb stepped forward, nodding in immediate agreement with Ethan's honest words. "We completely understand, Ethan," Caleb said firmly, without a single hint of his old arrogance.
We are willing to do whatever it takes, and we will move entirely at your pace." Over the next few months, the trio began to hang out again, but the dynamic of their relationship was completely different. They traded the loud, expensive Friday night diners for quiet afternoons at the park or casual dinners at Ethan's apartment. There were no more cheap jokes, no hidden secrets, and no more fake smiles to cover up real-life struggles. Ethan spoke openly about his financial goals, and his friends listened with genuine respect and active encouragement. One evening, he invited them to his workshop to see the finished oak shelf he had worked so hard to build. Caleb and Chloe admired the smooth, sturdy wood, genuinely proud of the skill their friend had developed. Ethan ran his hand along the polished surface, realizing the shelf was a perfect symbol of his own personal journey. He had survived a devastating betrayal, confronted his deepest insecurities, and emerged far stronger on the other side. Their friendship had been severely fractured, but from those broken pieces, they had built a brand new blueprint. It was a connection based on true vulnerability, firm boundaries, and an unbreakable foundation of real respect. What a journey for Ethan, Caleb, and Chloe. It takes an incredible amount of courage to confront the people you love, but it takes even more strength to forgive them while protecting your own dignity. True friends don't expect you to be perfect. They support you through your toughest seasons. Think about the phrases we explored today, like taking things out of context, internalizing criticisms, and rebuilding trust. These are powerful expressions you can use in your own English conversations when talking about relationships and life's challenges. You can find all the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever overheard something that hurt your feelings? How did you handle it? Did you walk away, or did you communicate your boundaries like Ethan did? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. It is a fantastic way to practice your English writing. Thank you so much for listening today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories to help you learn English through real life. See you in the next story. Goodbye.